I love going to the art museum, except for every time I go, I feel like a dumb idiot. To appear educated, maybe I'll say something like, I really like the colors on this one, but I don't really know. I'll wander around, taking my time to read the little title cards, but it just goes in one eyeball and out the other. I overheard two ladies talking about a piece of art to the point where they knew so much about it that one of the ladies wasn't sure if she had one in her own personal collection. Something about their words and their appreciation for the art shifted something inside me. I didn't just want to look at it, I wanted to deeply understand it. So with this in mind, I decided to do just that. I picked a few pieces to take a little deep dive on in this video. Not just the history of these art pieces, but to analyze what these pieces mean to me and what they mean to the world we currently live in. I just wanted to put it out there before starting this video that I am doing this for fun. I have never taken a deep art history course. I'm doing my best here with learning the facts as much as I can as I'm doing research. So I don't want to give this impression that I'm a true tapped-in art critic. Also, there are a lot of names in different languages, and I did look up how to say each one. I'm trying my best, but if it slips, if I say it wrong, let me know politely in the comments. I'm genuinely trying to say these things right, just to let you know. I decided to start my journey bottom to top in one of my favorite sections, photography. I once mentioned wanting to start photography to an older and wiser friend of mine when she looked at me and said, "Some people are just born with an eye for photography," and then she gave me one of these. So I took that as maybe I don't drop everything in my life to become a photographer, and I could only be so offended by her words because when you look at great photography, it becomes clear that certain people just have a different eye when it comes to capturing a compelling image. And Horst P. Horst really knows how. As you can see in this photograph of a very glamorous woman, posing in a dark dress with a shoulder piece and hat. Something I love about fashion photography is just seeing the different art forms mesh together. It's not about just taking a great picture, but showcasing the art of design. Horst P. Horst is a German-American photographer who is known for his fashion photography and portraiture. While this photo may seem simple, he was a pioneer of what we know now as classic fashion photography, which is often the style of photography we see in magazines like Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. So to understand this image, we have to break down the title. So PAQUIN, see I'm trying to say the French version of it. I think in American it'd be PAQUIN. PAQUIN. There was 7 different videos telling me different things. So I'm gonna say PAQUIN because that seemed the most consistent out of how people thought you pronounced it. So PAQUIN is House of PAQUIN, which is an infamous Parisian fashion house. Bijoux Boucheron is referencing the jewelry. Boucheron is a luxury jewelry brand. Studio Horst is Horst Studio, and Paris is where it was taken. At first glance at this photo, I became immediately curious as to what dress she is wearing. This information was not as easy to find as I thought it would be. I don't know why when I go to a museum, I always assume that everything in the museum is well known and well researched and that I can just Google it really easily and a bunch of information will pop up about it online, but that is not the case. So I had to do the research myself. To begin, this dress had to be made between 1937 and 1938 because it was photographed in 1938, and that's how fashion works. I found a website which had thousands of sketches of House of PAQUIN's work over the years. So I began my search, and I searched, and I searched until I realized that you can filter the dates on the website, so that made it a lot simpler and I had way less to go through. And after a little bit more searching, I found the dress. This dress was designed for summer 1938 in the series titled Été 1938 by designer Ana de Pombo. Ana de Pombo was a Spanish-born fashion designer living and working in Paris in the 1920s to the 1940s. At the height of her career, she was the lead designer at House of PAQUIN. It is said that her time at the house is what revived the brand, but her personal legacy is lesser known. During her time there, it is said that her most often used source of inspiration was flamenco, due to her Spanish heritage. We can see this inspiration in her designs through the long and full ruffled skirts and very prominent sleeves, which were a major part of flamenco stage costumes. I think this dress, as well as the photograph, is a great reminder of how deeply personal and culturally important fashion is. And when you compare this type of design to the fast fashion we see in the world today, it is just truly depressing. Obviously, the average person at the time wasn't walking around wearing a designer evening gown every day, but I'm talking about how people often now look back on the outfits they wore a few years ago and think, ugh, what the fuck? Because they haven't taken the time to find personal meaning and enjoyment through the clothes that they wear. And when you do, you can begin to form a wardrobe that you don't want to just throw away every year. Looking at this photograph, if you were to tell me that this photo was taken in the 2020s, minus the obvious differences in the camera technology, I would believe that it is a design that people would wear now. It's not trendy because it's art, so it can't really go out of style. And I think understanding that is the difference between being trendy and actually knowing and understanding fashion. I was scrolling the other day when a video of Kelly Catrone came up on my timeline, where she was being brutally honest and real about the difference between being a fashion person and being an influencer and how they really don't know shit.
You have your opinion, you talk to your audience. I'm a fashion person. I spent my whole life in the fashion industry. And while it's very, very easy to take like corrugated, clippy content and talk about it, do you know anything about the fashion business?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not a seasoned fashion person, so I fall into the category of trendy influencer in this scenario, but she's kind of right. I'm not saying that influencers shouldn't be invited into fashion spaces, because in this day and age, they are a part of the fashion ecosystem. But I think there's a bigger divide than people realize when it comes to actually understanding fashion and then just being like a casual consumer. With trends cycling faster than ever and everyone thinking their opinion is the most important one in the conversation, I think there's a lack of nuance when it comes to taste. Like, are you critiquing people's outfits because you understand it even a little bit as to why the outfit doesn't work? Or are you critiquing it because it doesn't align with what your algorithm is showing you at the moment? And I'm not even saying you need a degree in fashion and 10 years in the industry to make an informed decision on why you think something is ugly or cute, but at least a little bit of understanding. For example, seeing someone wearing a full Shein outfit without even knowing a lot about fashion, I think it's a safe critique to make that those clothes are ugly. And they're ugly because they're often stolen designs, poorly made, and just lack any design integrity. But if you're critiquing that outfit while you wear something you bought off of someone's Amazon must-have link tree, I don't think you really have a leg to stand on. I think this is why it's important to diversify the type of fashionable people that you follow. Even if you don't like their particular style, if they seem to have an informed understanding on the clothes that they like to wear, consuming that content can help you understand the intricacies of fashion. A few months ago, Anna Wintour announced that she was stepping down from her editor-in-chief position at Vogue, and that Chloe Malle was taking her place. And people were flaming her, saying that she's not fashionable enough to be the editor-in-chief at Vogue and that her clothes are ugly.
So this outfit isn't the worst outfit I've ever seen in my life. However, it doesn't really scream director of Vogue magazine.
From her paparazzi pictures, was I absolutely mind blown away by her outfits? No, but also she was literally working. And also, I and most people can't say shit because she could probably up and down explain her wardrobe and why she likes her pieces, compared to the majority of people who buy clothes because they're in right now and not because they have an understanding of them. I have, and probably will be guilty of this as well, so it's not a personal attack on anyone. Obviously, people have different tastes, but someone who has worked over a decade in the fashion industry probably, and hear me out, probably knows more than the average internet user about fashion. I think it's important to be able to admit that while you might not like something or would wear it personally, but that you can recognize when something or someone is fashionable outside of your personal bubble. Before I finish this section, I want to go one tier lower to the influencer fashion that I was talking about earlier. Well, there are a lot of influencers who copy and paste trends and people think like, whoa, they're so fucking fashionable, when are they? But I do think that there are influencers who over time have understandably made a name for themselves in fashion because of their interest in it. I think, like Chloe Malle, certain influencers like Emma Chamberlain, for example, are critiqued on their fashion sense because they're not wearing what's currently trending right now compared to what they wore in the past. And so people think that they are less fashionable now, but I think that it's the opposite. When certain influencers begin to gain a name for themselves, they are often invited to more fashion events. So they start to have closer proximity to the fashion world and begin to have a more informed taste on what they like. So while their audience might not always love it, I think that it just proves growth with understanding your own personal taste. And I think that interest and willingness to go into different styles of fashion is what makes someone a compelling fashion influencer. Overall, fashion history is just so fun. And the more you learn about it, the more you're able to curate your taste specifically for yourself. And I hope one day to have enough knowledge to be truly truly informed on my own fashion taste, I think it would be awesome to have a wardrobe where I feel really personally attached to a lot of the clothes that I wear, so I can feel connected to just who I am, but to fashion around me, because it's such a beautiful form of art. Tucked away in the corner of the first floor of the museum was the exhibition Strange Realities, the Symbolist's Imagination. And I loved this section. I mean, I liked all of the art that I'm talking about today, obviously, but this section was just so fun, yet complex to analyze. That sounds a little pretentious, but that's kind of how it is. In this section, the piece that I want to focus on is Strange Flower, Little Sister of the Poor by REDON. We see a flower blooming in a bare landscape with a face that is a little unnerving, to be honest. Before talking about the strange flower, I think it's important to note REDON's inspiration and ideology when creating this work. It is said that he developed a keen interest in Hindu and Buddhist religion and culture, which increasingly showed in his work. REDON is perhaps best known today for the dreamlike paintings created in the first decade of the 20th century, which were inspired by Japanese art and leaned towards abstraction. His work is considered a precursor to surrealism. Symbolist artists believe that art should reflect emotion or ideas instead of just mimicking what we see in the natural world. It was also a reaction against rationalism and materialism that had begun to dominate Western European culture. Back to the strange flower. We can see that he believes that nature has a soul of its own through the humanization of this flower with a face, which is really fun to contemplate. I think people often forget how interconnected nature and humanity are with each other. Nature would thrive without humans. And we're also the cause of the world dying, yes, and also without nature we would be dead. So maybe that kind of seems like we're more parasitic to nature than we are interconnected with each other. But obviously, we are both here together, so they have to be interconnected. And I think this is prevalent even in the simple ways. Life would be so boring without being able to smell the flowers, touch some grass, or look at like a beautiful mountain landscape. Maybe you don't agree that nature should be protected because we can enjoy it, but at the very least, it is worth protecting so we don't all die from like horrible natural disasters or poor air quality. I don't know exactly, but another aspect of this piece that I found interesting is the element of isolation. I think most people have had points in their life where they feel like they are completely alone. Pieces of yourself slowly falling away as you're stuck where you're at, like the petals fallen in the strange flower. In this image, the isolation feels cold, but there's clearly still growth there. And I think that's an important thing to contemplate about yourself from time to time. In general, REDON's work allows us to contemplate our emotions and our feelings about the world around us. Also, slight side note here, when I was looking at this image, it reminded me so much of the rose from The Little Prince. Or I guess I should say the rose from The Little Prince reminds me of this strange flower. It's not really that relevant to what I'm saying, but it's sort of relevant. Visually, how it is in the Netflix movie, stay with me here, or how it's interpreted when you read the novel, it is very similar to The Strange Flower, and I wonder if the author of that novel had seen this artwork before and gained some inspiration from it. I'm just thinking, I don't know, I didn't look it up, but it just seems very, very similar. Anyways, I mentioned earlier how many symbolist artists were in resistance to the materialist ideas that were happening around them. And I feel like that is so relevant today. God, REDON would probably faint if he saw what the fuck was happening on the TikTok shop nowadays. I've talked about this idea before, so I'm not going to get that deep into it, but people have really begun to replace the connections they have with other people around them with buying pointless things. Don't get me wrong, we all have to buy things in life. Sometimes it's nice to give yourself a little treat, but when you buy in excess just for the joy rush that you get from shopping, I think that it's very clear that you just are not connecting with the people in the world around you. And this is just one of the points that the symbolist artists were trying to make with this art, to encourage tapping into your emotions and contemplating bigger ideas than just yourself, instead of just focusing on the physical things that you have in your life. Now, to switch it up, let's get into some art that was made within the last 30 years. Pixie LIAO's Relationship Material was an exhibition that I thought was silly and beautiful. These works examine the power dynamics between artist and muse, touch on traditional gender roles, and show the evolution of their relationship. Before we get into the exhibition, let's get into a little bit of background about Pixie and her muse. Pixie was born in 1979 in Shanghai, China. an artist working in photography, installation, and performance. She met Japanese-born artist and musician Moro in 2006 when both were international students in Memphis, Tennessee. Their creative partnership has grown and evolved over the years to include many projects, including their music group PMIO, which has released 6 albums to date. As much as I love old art, it's so fun to go to an exhibition and then be able to go to the artist's Instagram afterwards. I don't know why. My favorite piece from this exhibition is Carry the Weight of You, where Pixie is holding naked Moro like a sack of potatoes with a straight face. I feel like this shows how in relationships, sometimes one person has to carry the mental or physical load for the other person from time to time when they aren't able to. She holds Moro with ease, and while they appear to be around the same height and weight, so this is logical, it's also a prod at stereotypical gender roles. Often in art and media, it's typical to see the imagery of a big man carrying a fragile feminine woman to safety or to protect her. Here, Pixie is protecting Moro. Another piece in the exhibit I loved was Get a Firm Grasp on Your Man. It shows the pair standing in a grassy field where Moro is naked. He's naked in a lot of the photos, FYI, and she's gripping his cheeks. This one just made me giggle with the combination of the name and like her firm grasp she has on his butt. But also, like the other piece I mentioned, it shows a layer of protectiveness she has with him, as well as a fondness. I think ass grabbing is often associated with sex and aggression, which makes sense, but here, while it does have some of those elements, it doesn't feel predatory, but instead shows a comfortability in their relationship. Sadly, by the time I put this video out, this exhibition will be gone from the Chicago Art Institute if you wanted to see it, but if you, for some reason, have an opportunity, if it comes to a place near you, I would highly recommend it because it was very beautiful and very fun. Shifting gears slightly here, I want to focus on Pixie's portrayal of the muse and then the idea of the muse as a whole. By definition, a muse is a person or personified force who is the source of inspiration for a creative artist. Pixie has an atypical take on this concept by showing her male partner in unconventional or awkward positions. And I'm not saying he's different from a typical muse because he's not worthy of inspiring art, but because traditionally, or at least in most people's minds, the muse is usually a beautiful woman. She has great taste, she knows art, she's just generally worthy of inspiring someone. When it comes to muses, I think a lot of people's minds go to someone like Edie Sedgwick, who was Andy Warhol's muse, or Françoise Guillot, who is one of Pablo Picasso's muses. These women are beautiful and understandably inspire art. However, being a muse can also be dehumanizing and also kind of parasitic. That's a bit of a dramatic way to put it, but I didn't really know how else to say it. For example, most people probably don't even know that Françoise was a talented artist in her own right. You could argue, well, her work probably wasn't as good as his, that's just why we don't know who she is. But to that I say, because if that was true, how could she be his muse? Being a muse is more than just being aesthetically beautiful. It requires having thoughts and tastes that the artist finds so inspiring that they can't help but internalize their words and ideas and make art out of it. To think that she is incapable of at least matching his artistic level, I think is kind of misogynistic. Ooh. There's also a lot of romanticization around the idea of being a muse. I think people think that if they are an artist's muse, that it finally validates their beauty or thoughts and ideas. Which in a way it does, because you couldn't be a muse without someone seeing something in you and wanting to create from it. But also, you have no control over what they are seeing in you or how they use it. In Pixie's work with her partner, while in a lot of photos she's taking the dominant role, you can see how they are in a working partnership with each other, and that there's a mutual respect for each other's identities. And I don't think that's always the case when it comes to being a muse. There are many accounts of the muse feeling like they are unable to connect back with the work that the artist derived from them. Dora Maar, who was the muse for Picasso's Weeping Woman, once said, "All of Picasso's portraits of me are lies. They're Picasso's. Not one is Dora Maar." And I understand how frustrating it would be to be perceived in a certain way that wasn't up to you. Dora Maar was also an extremely talented artist as well, so I can see how it is doubly frustrating how the artwork that you are best known for isn't your own. Online, when you go through content about muses, I feel like there's often two ideas that are common. One is people wishing that they could be someone's muse, and the other is people talking about being your own muse. which I think is interesting, especially when it comes to being online. It's very clear that everyone just wants to be seen. So I feel like when people are wanting to be a muse, it's not that they want to inspire art, but they want to be able to tangibly see how someone else sees them, which has got to be only exacerbated by social media in general. And I think that's valid to wish to be seen, but I think it's also very inspiring when you can see someone who knows exactly who they are and are able to create from it. Within the Symbolist section that I mentioned earlier, there was another small section within that section, which was varying styles of artists' self-portraits. And I've always thought that artist self-portraits are some of the most interesting types of work, since it's not just an image of someone from long ago or whenever it was made, but a look into the artist's inner self. In this section, the one that caught my eye was Self-Portrait in Moonlight by Edvard Munch. I knew nothing about Edvard Munch before starting my research, or at least I didn't know him by name. His most famous piece of art is something that we all probably know, and that is the Scream. Did I feel kind of like a fucking idiot that I didn't know that he made that before? Yes. That's the end of that. I felt like an idiot. But that is what learning is for. So I can't put that on myself too much because I know it now. To understand Munch's self-portrait deeper, let's talk a little bit about his life. He was extremely mentally unwell, and that's kind of an understatement, to be quite honest. His mother died when he was very young, and his father was, well, from the description of what the author of the article that I was getting information from described him as, is as imbued with religiosity that darkened into gloomy fantasism. Which I think means that he was the equivalent of the people standing on the side of the road saying, the world is ending, Jesus will save you, you will go to heaven or you will go to hell. I think that was his dad's vibe. So this led Munch to be a deeply anxious person, once saying, without anxiety and illness, I am a ship without a rudder. My sufferings are a part of myself and my art. They're indistinguishable from me, and their destruction would destroy my art. The author of the article that I was getting a lot of this information from also described his life as, and I quote, a never-ending saga of woe. And I do feel bad for him a little bit. Like, that sounds horrible. Throughout his life, he was an alcoholic, had some toxic relationships, and lived in isolation, which was all very prevalent in his work. In a self-portrait in Moonlight, we see a man looking distant and deep in thought in the nighttime. The background is unclear, and everything appears to be fading away. Anxiety often leads to blind overthinking, and alcoholism leads to a hazy memory. The colors are also very intentional, obviously. Blue equals sad. I know that one. I knew that one before the video. And there's a level of darkness within this piece through the colors. Overall, this portrait makes me feel very cold and also very curious as to what he's thinking about. This piece was made in somewhere between 1904 and 1908, which means it was shortly after he shot off a part of his finger in a little spat with his ex-lover-ish woman. I say ish because it seems like he never really liked her, but she was obsessed with him, so they had a relationship. And in general, when he made this piece, he was really just off the rails when it came to his alcoholism, and it's also thought to be when he made some of his finest work. Shortly after this period, in 1909, he began to become sober-ish. I don't know if he was sober, but became more sober. And he also started to get his mental illness under control. People don't consider his work post-sobriety to be as good as his work when he was in his mental illness. Which is kind of sad that he was right about what I mentioned earlier, where he was saying that the destruction of his anxiety and his illness would be the destruction of his art as well. He did a lot of self-portraits over the years, so if you want to check some of them out, I'm going to put a link down below just to that article. I'm putting lots of links down below, but that's going to be one of them. So you can check out more of his pieces because they are very... He was a fucked up man, so he had some interesting work. Anyways, let's talk about some modern self-portraits or selfies. Munch believed that a painter mustn't merely transcribe external reality, but should record the impact a remembered scene had on his own sensibility. Obviously, most self-portraits we see today are photographs, not paintings, but I like this idea that he had about portraits. And I think that's something we're lacking today when it comes to modern self-portraits or selfies that are taken or posted today. You know, I'm not saying that every thirst trap mirror selfie has to be artistic and intentional, but I think it would be good practice at times to focus on more than just physical appearance when it comes to capturing yourself. Insecurity is rampant online. Even when people are attempting to appear raw. It's typically combined with posing and filters. There's been a shift in selfies that we see online compared to early internet days, where the goal was to share photos with family or friends, to now taking photos to impress others or to appear aesthetically pleasing. I feel like this makes it clear that a lot of our modern self-portraits are no longer used to capture a moment or feeling, and instead used as a way to gain followers as a commodifiable tool. Obviously, this isn't everyone on the internet. We still have our Facebook moms taking selfies saying #blessed underneath. But in general, I feel like a lot of people function with this idea in mind that the photo they're taking is not just for themselves or to just capture a moment or emotion. Is there something horribly wrong with this? No. But I think in the future, people will regret taking photos purely for aesthetics. Like me personally, it's rare that I look back at a hot selfie I took and I go, ugh, I love that I captured that moment. But there are portraits that I have that I have an emotional connection to. For example, when my roommates and I were moving out of our apartment a few months ago, we decided to take self-portraits. This went a little bit wrong as I kept forgetting to turn the film because we were taking it on a film camera. But what came out at the end was an absolute masterpiece to me. We put some of our iconic household items in the background, posed against our old as fuck couch, and the layered photographs matched the chaos that was happening as we were moving out. And I feel like it just perfectly encapsulates how we were feeling in that moment. And that is a self-portrait that I will always remember. So I guess my point with bringing all of this up is that I think people should be more intentional with taking self-portraits sometimes. Taking them when you're sad or happy or both or whatever, just so you can have a true image of who you really are. So you can look back on those photos, paintings, whatever it may be, and feel real emotions tied to that art. Alright, thank you so much for joining me on my little deep dive into some art at the Chicago Art Institute. Shout out Chicago Art Institute. If you live in the Chicagoland area and you didn't know, it's free on Thursdays and it's open till 8 p.m. so you can go after work. It's a great time, chill. I would love to do another one of these videos actually because I feel like it was just mind-blowing to me. I don't even know how to finish that. It was just mind-blowing to me. Alright, my camera's dying right now, or I would say more. Follow me on Instagram, subscribe down below. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, give me a like, leave me a comment, tell me your favorite piece of art. Thank you so much for watching.